I kind of didn't believe the LaMelo trade rumors at first. Because we heard about this throughout the season, at least this past season. And they had a great run in the second half of the year, almost got into the playoffs. And I thought that they was going to continue to build on from there because we seen this team button together, but things have changed mighty fast. LaMelo Ball, he goes to the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves, they shipped out Nas Reed, 3 first-round pick swaps, 3 second-round pick swaps, and a 2033 unprotected first-round pick. First of all, the year 2033 sounds insane. And I was thinking about that. I was like, we closer to 2030, Randall. We closer to a new
Oh,
decade.
yeah. Oh, we're knocking on the door.
Oh man, insane. But all in all, LaMelo Ball, he's in Minnesota. Her and Anthony Edwards. They re-signed Ao DeSumo, which I thought that was a great move. Rudy Gobert, I'm still kind of up in there. And they traded away Julius Randle. He's now with the Brooklyn Nets. So let's just talk about LaMelo with Timberwolves. What was your first reaction when you saw that breaking trade?
So when it comes to a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves, we're talking about a team that went to the conference finals back-to-back seasons, and LaMelo Ball, in all his tenure with Charlotte, he has been an all-star player and the talent has been there, but the main sticking point with LaMelo Ball has been his maturity issues. And Charlotte was banking on him being that franchise player, but you've seen flashes of brilliance, but then you've also seen a lot of those knuckleheaded tendencies. So now you bring LaMelo Ball, into a situation with Anthony Edwards, where Anthony Edwards, there's been times where he's shown, some immaturity issues. Now he has shown some growth, I would think, in the last year or two, when it comes to like being a better leader. I think Ant-Man has shown some growth in that aspect of it, but now, you bring in a LaMelo Ball, who, now Minnesota has needed a point guard for so long because, Mike Conley, God bless him, he's been getting long in the, he's been getting, pretty long in the tooth, and, and he still could be around to be like that on that Udonis Haslam role to provide that veteran leadership because they definitely need an adult in the room. So, I mean, I do understand that. So, I do understand Minnesota addressing that need as far as the point guard is concerned. And then, when they signed Io DeSumo a few days ago to a long-term deal, he signed for a 112 million dollar contract, to go back to the Wolves. So you're thinking that, oh, okay, maybe they were really banking on Io DeSumo being like their, point guard, and he did have a 40-point game in the playoffs, and he was really good for Minnesota in the playoffs this season. So, you were thinking that, okay, maybe that, Minnesota was going to bank on them. So I think it was definitely a big surprise and a shock. And I think it's a very risky move for Minnesota, in my opinion, because, you're talking about a team that's been knocking on the door, trying to, cross the door and get into the finals for the first time. And then now you're trading multiple draft picks potentially for a player that's, never been, outside of the play-in. So I mean, I think it's a huge gamble for Minnesota now. But now that being said, I do think that, I can't see Minnesota making this move without Anthony Edwards' approval. I'm pretty sure like they went. I'm sure Tim Connolly, the Wolves GM. I'm pretty sure like they went to Ant-Man about this move. But at the end of the day, like sometimes you gotta swing for the fence, and I think in the Western Conference it's very competitive. I think this is a move where the Wolves where Tim Connolly swinging for the fences.
Your last statements, they're pretty much summed up how I felt about this trade. Like it's a risky move. They surrendered a lot. And not just in this trade, but not having Julius Randle no more. You give up a lot of front court depth, and then now you out without former six man of the year, Nas Reed. That's a big risk. But also, like you said, at the same breath, you gotta swing for the fences. You gotta show your superstar, your franchise player that you are about winning because there were stories going around that Anthony Edwards was getting frustrated. Like you said, they went to the West Conference Finals 2 straight seasons, fell short of that this past season. And you got to do something because the teams that are ahead of you, Not only that they are good and finals ready, but they are still young too. Matter of fact, even younger than Team you have. Uh, you said you necessarily didn't like this move. I do not know how I feel about this at all. Because individually, and man, great player. LaMelo, great player. Them together, I just don't know how that's gonna work, man.
It's a
Like
wild card, man, because like they could
that's not
like I think it just it feels like it's either gonna be it's gonna work out really well or it's gonna be a disaster. Like it feels like there's no in between. Like and even when you bring up Nas Reed, it's like I mean Nas Reed. I mean locally in Minnesota, he was absolutely beloved by
mm,
the Wolves fans. You know in Minneapolis. So I mean, that's and even during the playoff, these last several playoff runs, I mean, Nas Reed has really been like one of the like real like emotional leaders on that team. Whenever he like has, I think to me, whenever he has a really good game, like the Wolves usually tend to win. So I mean, I think that is going to be a big loss. Now it looks like Minnesota as an organization, they're going to play a little bit more smaller, where it looks like Jaden McDaniels is going to be at the 4. Ant Man's probably gonna have to move to the 3, and then you're gonna have they're probably gonna have DeSumo and Lamelo like in the backcourt. So I think they saw how San Antonio was able to do like a 3 guard, like was able to play 3 guard.
the question is, the main question is this a move that can get them over the hump in the Western Conference? Because that's their goal. They want to go to the NBA Finals. Now you have a team where you got your guard dominant now. Like you say, you still got Rudy Gobert, got Jaden McDaniels, who everybody loves on this team too. Uh, and then they just drafted Isaiah Evans, who I think that was an underrated selection right there. I think he can grow into a nice role player at least on this team, and then may bring back Dante DiVincenzo too. So looking at that, do you think this team can make it out the West next season?
I personally don't think this move gets them any closer to the OKC San Antonio, who right now is the clear top 2 teams in the Western Conference right now. I don't think this move necessarily gets them any closer. You do give Ant Man a backcourt running mate, but the thing is that even with LaMelo, it's like, he has, I mean, the playmaking is there, but sometimes like the shot selection, it's like, is I mean, I think is Ant Man gonna get frustrated sometimes when Lamelo, pulls up from the like in deep and ends up not making those shots? Like, is he gonna have the patience for that? And here's another thing that we have to take into consideration is Chris Finch. Chris Finch is known for being he's a pretty tough coach. He's a straight shooter. He'll get at he's been known to get at certain guys. Like even he'll call he and Ant Man. They have that kind of relationship where they'll get into it at times and then they'll, get over it. But, so like, is he going to be able to, build that trust with LaMelo and are those two going to be able to coexist? So, I mean, I think right now that it's this move to me is like one big giant question mark. So, and I can't say for sure if Minnesota's a better team right now.
I want to get your take on this because I've been talking about this for the past couple days. What you think the Celtics should do with Jaylen Brown? Should they try to mend those fences, or should they look to trade him in the summer, or maybe at the trade deadline next when we get into next season?
It depends on how frustrated Jaylen Brown is about being put on the trading block once again. Like you're talking about a player that was, considered an MVP candidate last season. Jason Tatum was, missed a good chunk of the season from the Achilles injury, and the Celtics, they still ended up becoming the number 2 seed. Jaylen Brown, ended up proving that he is capable of being a number 1 option on a top tier playoff team. And then and then and they end up having a disappointing finish in the playoffs, and then and now you're being put on the trading block. I know he did have some comments on his streams about he did have some comments after the playoffs where he talked about how like this was like his favorite season of his career. just kind of being able to be the number one option on the team. So he did he did, mention that in the stream. So, I think it begs the question of like, if there is a time for Jaylen Brown to make a move to be to become that number one option on a different team. And if he feels disrespected by, Brad Stevens and the Celtics by being put on the trading block once again, then I think if that bridge has been burned, then I think if you're the Celtics, you have to move him. If he does take pride in being a Celtic and he does want to remain a Boston Celtic, if he does still, enjoy, running with Tatum, then I think, they can be able to work it out. Because I can understand like them putting Jaylen Brown on the trading block for a Giannis type of player. Like that would be the type of player that, the Celtics, like I think that's the only type of player that you would give up a Jaylen Brown type of player for. But if they're still, shopping Jaylen Brown around after the Giannis trade, then that means that that bridge has been burned, and that I think Jaylen Brown's probably going to be on another team next year.
I just can't help but think that this is unnecessary, man. Like, first of all, first of all, whether you really believe it's your favorite season or not, you can't say that a day after you got
I agree.
eliminated from the playoffs after you were up 3-1.
Yeah,
And the team that eliminated you got swept the next round. So like you just can't say that at that moment. Like if that was your favorite season, fine. But the timing, it was just poor timing. And then people thought that back then, when they were trying to build themselves up into title contenders and eventually capture the championship, people thought back then that the pairing of Tatum and Brown was going to meet his doom at some point anyway, for one reason or another. But it's for me, it's the fact that they already made it work. You know what I'm saying? They've been to two NBA finals together. They won one. They proved that they can share the same backcourt. I don't even think Tatum, you know, and then this is the St. Louis connection. I don't even think he tripping off of everything. Like, but it's just Jaylen Brown. I think Jaylen Brown's ego can get ahead of him sometimes. And then at the same time, if you're the Boston Celtics, just talk to the guy if you had a problem with what he said. Don't just start shopping him around because he did lead you to a great record this season, and he had an MVP type season, and he's your Finals MVP. So yeah, man, it's just an unfortunate and unnecessary situation. I think.
like if you're the Celtics, like, are you going to get a player like to replace Jaylen Brown? I mean, it's very unlikely you're going to get any valuable pieces. So I mean, I think if you're the Celtics, you definitely want to work it out. But if the situation becomes too toxic, but if the situation gets uglier in the off season to where Jaylen Brown is still, if he comes into training camp disgruntled and then he ends up becoming a problem in the locker room, now I don't know if it'll necessarily, I don't know if it'll get to that point with Jaylen Brown, but you just don't want to have like an unhappy player.
Austin Reed signed a new deal, max extension, 4 years, $185 million. First of all, I want to say this. Shout out to him. If you
Yeah.
don't know the story, going from undrafted, had to build his way up, fighting, clawing, playing with superstars on the team that has finals or bust almost expectations. Had one a hell of a season last season. So shout out to him. Uh, my thing is when I was writing this topic and think about how we gonna convey our opinions, I wasn't even tripping off the deal or Austin Reeves necessarily. The first line, and I hate this because mainstream media does this all the time, but you probably know where I'm going with this. The first thing that I thought about when I saw it was what's going to happen with LeBron. Well, what's going to happen with all that? So let's just get into that. First of all, go ahead and give your reaction. Austin Reeves getting maxed out. Do you agree with that? And then how this going to affect LeBron and the Lakers as they try to work something up?
I expected the Lakers to re-sign Austin Reeves. Like I didn't expect. I didn't expect him to, go to another team. Now I did, see that, the Detroit Pistons were, willing to make a max offer for Austin Reeves. So, and that was a team that originally wanted to draft. Ironic, that was a team that originally wanted to draft Austin Reeves, and then Reeves told him no because he wanted to sign with the Lakers as an undrafted free agent. So
Oh,
I know Detroit.
that's a crazy story. I didn't know that.
Yeah, oh, yeah. You can look it up. Yeah, you can look it up. Yeah, yeah, Austin Reeves. Yeah, the Pistons wanted to draft him late in the second round, but like his agent, like him and his agent told him no, that he wanted to sign with the Lakers as an undrafted free agent. So that even makes the story of him, and he did grow up a Laker fan. So I mean that is the kind of sentimental aspect of him, signing this deal. So like I do, as a Laker fan, like I do appreciate that aspect of it, and he has played well enough to earn his money. But at the same time, and I also noticed that like when it comes to the business aspect of it, like yes, like he signed for 4 years and he's getting paid over $40 million a year. But I do know that for this particular season upcoming, if it relates to LeBron, he only has a $21 million cap hit this season. So even with this deal, the Lakers still have about $50 million in cap space to play with. So really, when it comes to relating about whether LeBron's going to be back with the Lakers or not, it's really going to depend on what's going to be the market for specifically Rui Hachimura and Luke Kennard, and bringing those two guys back, because I think the Lakers are probably gonna have to choose between one of those two guys. Both of those guys shot the lights out from the 3-point line during the playoffs. Rui, I think he had the highest percent 3-point percentage in playoff history. I think this past season. So I think Rui, I think he's played. I think his playoff performance has probably boosted his value to where he might be able to get he might be able to get $20 million a year on the open market. So I think if he gets to that $20+ million mark, I think it's going to be very difficult for the Lakers to keep him. They could bring back Luke Kennard and then Marcus Smart, and then see if they could and they could do a package to shed some salary, get some extra salary, and maybe like try to trade Jarrett Vanderbilt, package Jarrett Vanderbilt, Dalton Connect. You could see if you can shed some salary that way. There's still a pathway to where like LeBron can come back, and then they can still be able to make certain, like either bring certain guys back from last year, or they could be able to have enough space to trade one of their picks to bring somebody else, bring another big in that can fit the needs of the team. I think it could get a bit tricky when it comes to Reeves, because his when it comes to his scoring ability, like I mean, he's been an ascending offensive player. He's gotten better in his skills every season. He's upped his scoring average. But when it comes to Luka and Reeves as a backcourt, man, it's like defensively, man, both of them leave a lot to be desired, man. And I do think as a Laker fan, like I do love watching both of them cook on the offensive end. But we it's just like but in order for us to be a serious contender, like if this is gonna be if this is gonna be our core, man, it's like we gotta get some defense on this team, man, because like if to be able to cover both of those guys' defensive liabilities, man, because like I mean this year during OKC, man, like AJ Mitchell was looking like Michael Jordan and Kobe out there going against us, and like they were going, and like OKC was going like late in games, like they were going at Austin Reeves every time. He's been a disappointment the last couple years in the playoffs, man. So it's like I just so for this upcoming season, like I think we can still be able to bring LeBron back, and like I feel like I am one of those Laker fans that does want LeBron back, because I do think that he still showed that even in the playoffs, this past year and us getting out of round one, that he's still very very valuable like to a team. Now I don't think now the city obviously he's not going to be making anywhere near max money, but I still think they should. But I hope that there could be a reasonable deal to where like we can bring him back, but still at a respectable number, to where it's like, because he ain't gonna be signing for no vet minimum. Like, come on now, like that, like it's LeBron James. He ain't signing for no damn vet minimum.
Oh, man. Oh. first, I think it was necessary for like a future. Like, so you got a good uh offensive backcourt with Luca and Austin Reeves. And the Lakers need that. Always on train like they needed somebody that can get a bucket outside of LeBron because it's been kind of the LeBron show past couple seasons before Luca got there, and they got that together. Sidebar, I have high hopes for Jared Vanderbilt, man. I thought he was just going to be like that anchor defensively and just hasn't worked. So yeah, I could see them moving on from now. Now going to the part where I bring LeBron in, like you said, he ain't gonna sign for no vet minimum, but I think this is a time where he can accept a little bit less than what he's going for. I mean, I I believe that he still wants to win the championship, but I don't know how you do that with a Lakers team that year in, year out has to move things around and make money work somehow. Like they've gotten better at it, but like you can't, there's no real like continuity on this team. And I think this is the opportunity to have that. Like I think they should bring back Luke Kennard and Rui Hachimura. Like try to bring both those guys back. But for me, it's like LeBron is like, are you willing to take a pay cut? Even though I believe he shouldn't, and I don't think any black man or black woman should take pay cuts and shortchange themselves. But however, you trying to win, you trying to win the championship here in the Lakers. We see the money. Sometimes the money ain't what it is, and they got to just move stuff around. And now you got Austin Reeves long term, and you gonna have Luca long term. You got to lock him up too. So I don't know, man. I don't know how this gonna work out.
And Luca's extension eligible next season, and that's going to be a quiet, not. And I think that's why there's more of a sense of urgency for the Lakers, to make moves this offseason with the cap space that they got, because because they're going to go to Luca next offseason, and they're gonna say, "Hey, do you want to sign an extension?" And if he's still, up in the air about signing an extension, now we're gonna have a similar Giannis situation potentially happening with the Lakers, because because the way the name of the game is now, it's like, if guys aren't if your superstar player is not gonna sign that eligible extension, then you have to consider shopping them around, because you can't let them walk in free agency. And that's why Milwaukee had to move Giannis this offseason, because he was about to enter the last year of his contract. And so, so if Luka ends up not, accepting that extension, then, that could be a potential, situation where, there's rumblings where could Luka, end up, wanting to go somewhere else. You never know. So like in this modern NBA, it's like it's not a guarantee that guys are gonna stay. Luka didn't ask to get traded to the
Not
Lakers.
anymore. Yeah, not anymore. Talked about this on the Stacey on Sports podcast show on the podcast network. I thought this was first of all, we know Miami wanted to bring a superstar player. They got him. I think this automatically puts them at least top 4 in the East. As far as getting into the NBA Finals, I don't know. I still don't know. There's still a lot to be done. But let me get your opinion. Giannis, Miami Heat, paired with those other guys, including Bam Adebayo. Do you think right now this is enough for them to dethrone the Knicks and at least get out the East and go to the NBA Finals?
I don't think I don't think they necessarily have enough scoring outside. I think they still could use another perimeter scorer. I think that's probably the last thing that they need is probably. I think.
Oh yeah, sorry to interrupt. Also, should mention Bobby Portis is now on the Heat, so they got the 6 man, good 6 man.
Yeah, I do like them bringing in Bobby Portis. I do. I mean, I think defensive. I think defensively, I think Miami's going to be absolutely outstanding on the defensive side of the ball. Having Bam, Bam's versatility. He's a guy that can, he could switch. He can guard inside and he can cover, smaller guard. He can cover smaller guards. He has that kind of versatility to be able to slide his feet, and I mean, and Bam has, and obviously, Bam did have like an 83-point game this season. So I mean, he can, he is capable of, being an offensive player, being like a high quality offensive player. But I do think I think they could use another perimeter scorer. I think that's probably like the last missing piece they probably need. But I mean, I think Pat Riley, like, I mean, the Godfather, he does it once again. I think it's a move that Miami's had to. I think it's a move that they had to make as a franchise. Just to be able to get. During the Jimmy Butler years, it's like, Miami, they made it to the finals as they made it to the finals as an 8 seed. Even when they were in the bubble, I think they were a 5 seed. So I mean, they were never, even during the Jimmy Butler years, they were never really like a top 4 team as far as like in the regular season, as far as, getting home court advantage like they were, during like the, days where they had D Wade and Bron. So so I mean, I think, Miami, the last couple of years, like, they've been a playing team. I even heard, like, because, I think even before, Bam Adebayo had that 83-point game, I think Bam, mentioned that, he had a conversation with D Wade, I think a week or two before that, where, D Wade was kind of saying, like, when it comes to, the Miami Heat culture and to that standard, it's like, being a playing team is not good enough. And I think, a lot of those, guys up there, like a lot of those guys like the D Wades and Alonzo Mournings, the UDs and like those OGs, and when it comes to the Miami Heat, I feel like a lot of those guys, like, they're speaking about, like, within that brass, they're tired of being a playing team these last several years. So it's like, I think this is, they gave up a lot to get Giannis. They basically told Milwaukee, we're gonna give up, you're gonna give up a lot of draft picks, and you guys can pretty much pick any player that you want off of our roster outside of Bam. So, I think, I mean, yes, it is a lot to give up, but I do think that, when it comes to all those draft picks, like, I mean, are you really gonna get a player as good as Giannis? Are you really gonna get a player as good as Giannis for those picks? And, I know Giannis has had, a couple of injuries the last couple of years, but I do think that he still has more than enough in the tank to, be able to he still has enough good years left to where, like, he'll still be able to be be a superstar caliber player, and still, be able to, and when it comes to his mentality and the way and like the fierceness that he plays with, he definitely fits into the Heat culture, and like he really will be like that tone setter that you want in a superstar. So I mean, I think it's a great move from Miami, like, to build that foundation to get that superstar player. Now they just have more work to do when it comes to, filling out the rest of the roster and trying to build complementary pieces around Giannis.
This is the end of the floor seats here on Stacey on Sports. I am Stacey Carter II, joined by Randall Hamilton. Follow us everywhere on social media at Stacey on Sports. Keep a lookout for more episodes because we're going into free agency, Randall, man. I think it's gonna be crazy. We just talked about some crazy moves, and it is more to come. Keep a lookout for other things on the Stacey on Sports Network. But until next time, y'all take it easy. This is the Floor Seats here on YouTube.
Make sure y'all subscribe to the channel and follow me
Yes,
on Instagram at Rand_Hamilton.
yeah, absolutely. Please do.